Okay, today we are going to talk about chapter 24, lesson 5, and about the peace that they made. So, first of all, the peace talks were in Paris in January of 1919, and 27 different nations sent representatives. Notably, Germany, of course, being like the enemy, right, was not included, and neither was Russia, right, because they left. So they are notably absent. Um, the four that kind of dominated the peace talks were called the Big Four. The U.S. President Wilson, who a lot of people looked up to, right, because the US came in and kind of helped them finally win it. Great Britain's Prime Minister at the time was David Lloyd George. France's Premier, George Clemenceau, and Italian Prime Minister, Victoria Orlando. So there's a picture right there of those four, the main four, okay? And so Wilson proposed a plan for peace, and he had 14 different points, so it came to be known Wilson's 14 points. I'm not going to make you memorize them all, but to just sum them up quickly, there are a lot of different things. A lot of it was adjusting the boundaries in Europe, and I will show you a map of that in a minute. Some of it was giving up land from the people who lost. Some of it was creating new nations from the ones that have been fighting for their own, independence. So there's a lot of that. He really believed that the people who lived in that area should have a say in who ruled them, and that's called national self-determination. That like the Czechs can have Czechoslovakia after that, and Poland for the Poles, right? He thought they should have a say. He also thought there should be rules for how to carry out relations between the countries in the future, and how to, solve their problems. He did get some criticism that it seemed very kind of naive. He wanted free trade and freedom of the seas going along with that, and to end all secret treaties. And he thought, we'll talk about what he thought to do instead, and then limits on arms, right? So there's no arms race again of building up your military. And he also thought they should have a peaceful settlement. There's a lot of disputes going on about the different colonies. Remember how they've been building up all their different colonies with imperialism, and so there was some fighting over that. So he's trying to come up with solving all the major problems that is happening in the world so that we don't have another war. His last and favorite thing was the League of Nations. He thought all the member countries should join this group that's going to talk out their problems. And unfortunately, the member leagues would also, kind of join in on an agreement to help each other and solve their problems. So it did get some criticism. So anyway, to sum it up, the other major powers were not very willing to talk about all his compromising. Many of them wanted revenge, right? They've lost a lot of people, millions of people for fighting for those years, right? Whereas the U.S. maybe is not feeling that revenge quite as much because they just joined in for the last year. Also, Europe is a mess, war torn, all the warfare and bombing and, trench building and everything has really messed up their land. And so many of these, you could think from France's point of view, right, where theirs is a mess, they want to have payment to help them fix all this, and they blame Germany, right? And also at this same time, there is besides all this bad feelings and economy is a mess and political conflicts going on, also it's the Spanish flu, right, in 1919, and millions are dying from that flu epidemic. So the French really would like to see Germany broken apart into smaller countries where they won't seem like a threat anymore. And the British want reparations payments for their damage and that they've suffered during the war. And so, unfortunately, they're not really liking Wilson's ideas. So he's too compromising. Okay, so basically, in the long run, they do make a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles. It's finally figured out by June of that year. And in it, basically, they say Germany has to accept full responsibility for the war. They have to pay billions of dollars in reparations payments. That means money for damages you caused in the war. They have to disarm completely. They have to give up their overseas colonies and some of their territory in Europe. And of course, they also decided to carve up some of the other land from the other people fought in the war. They take some from Austria-Hungary and Russia. And you'll see in this map I'm showing you of quite a bit of changes that happen in Europe after this, okay? Also, some of this is, giving back land to the people who had it before they were taken over by these empires. So they're not necessarily new, and some are the new ones. But one of the things that did happen is Wilson, the one thing he was able to get out of his plan was a League of Nations. Okay, and he really thought, even though a lot of the rest of it he felt like was more revenge than he wanted. He thought that if we could all just come together in this League of Nations, all the countries could talk out their problems in the future and, they could fix it. Anything that happens. Unfortunately, when he brings this treaty back to the United States, the U.S. wasn't so sure they liked this treaty, okay? Some people didn't like the treaty because they thought it was really harsh to Germany, which it was. And of course, remember we talked about how there's quite a few German immigrants, and some people didn't think it was fair that they blamed it all on Germany. A lot of other people, though, didn't like the League of Nations idea because they're worried, right, that we are going to get drawn into another war in the future if we join this. And some people are wishing we could kind of go back to a little bit more like isolationist. And by joining the League, you're then committed to being involved in world affairs permanently. Maybe realistically, the reason this really went badly was because Wilson was going to maybe run for election and in the next year, and the Republicans see this as a chance to embarrass him and the Democrats before the election. So politically, right? Henry Cabot Lodge, this is a picture of him, is the main person who was going after Wilson. He was a senator from Massachusetts, and he headed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So he's involved in these things. And he is unfortunately a longtime foe of Wilson's. So he purposely delays the vote on the treaty to try to give more time for people to listen to the opposition before the vote. He also went ahead and proposed that they should make some changes, saying the U.S. should only have limited obligations they have to fulfill, so they're not so fully vested in the League of Nations. Wilson tries to still, get everyone to agree that his idea is good. He goes touring around the country trying to, rally support. He is exhausted after dealing with the war effort and all the touring, and he ends up suffering a stroke. And so the long story short there, of course, his health isn't good after that. He doesn't end up running in for election. And ultimately, the Senate rejects the Treaty of Versailles. So the question, of course, then is, what is going to happen? Well, we have to, stop fighting officially. So we do sign treaties with each of the central powers separately, but we do not agree to all the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, and therefore the U.S. never joins the League of Nations, even though it was a U.S. president's idea to join the League of Nations. So that's an interesting that it went on without us.